Coming in number 5, we've got the Rat Men of Southend. Who could forget Dear Rat Boy, am I right? Well, if you forgot him before, prepare to have some imagery burned into your brain for life. There are actually a couple of tales referring to a rat man from Southend, so why not talk about both? The first is a little more fun and a little less tragic. Tragic nonetheless, but more juicy details and less cold-blooded murder. So according to some, at one point, the mayor of Southend was indeed a rat bastard. Not literally, but in the way that he constantly and unrepentantly cheated on his wife. Poor woman, although she did choose to marry a politician. So as divine punishment for this mayor's consistent adultery, his son was born with a rat face and a long tail. This did not sit well with the social climbing couple, but what could they do? For a while they would feed their son the only thing he craved: meat. This rat boy would chow down on raw flesh like nobody else. Eventually they realized they couldn't possibly raise a meat-eating rat lad in full view of the public, so the mayor had an underpass with secret chambers built just for his rat son. And for the rest of his days, Rat Boy lived in the dank, dark underpass, attempting escape and scaring anyone who dared pass through. He eventually grew into a rat man in his own right, and even killed a few folks for food. The legend persists, with some night tours insisting that they stroll the underpass in case he decides to come out at night. Yeesh. The second story has more to do with the man and also rats, but I'll tell it anyway. Apparently there was an old man also living below an underpass. He had no belongings save for his clothes and a blanket, and he did his best to stay hidden away. However, one day a group of rowdy teenagers came across this man and mercilessly beat him. Once he was incapacitated, they stole his blanket and left him to die in the cold. Unable to move due to his injuries, the man eventually did succumb to hypothermia. Following his death, hundreds of rats emerged from the shadows to consume his lifeless body. Thus began the legend of the Rat Man, consumed by the scurrying dark masses that plague the city. Some say that you can still hear strange scrabbly noises near that underpass. Could it be the descendants of those rats looking for more human flesh? Or maybe it's the ghost of the Rat Man himself, crawling around, disemboweled and confused. Coming in number 4, we've got fairy dogs. Doesn't that just sound lovely? Like a little dachshund puppy with little Tinkerbell wings? Well, that is not what these fairies are like. Of course, the fairies that folks see in Disney movies are much friendlier than the ones from folklore. Fairies of legend are often mischievous, looking to cause trouble in best case scenarios and trying to ruin people in harsher cases. So it stands to reason that fairy dogs might not be so sociable. No belly rubs or ear scratches will make these fearsome canines friendly. See, there's an idea out there that crossroads are the door to another world. If you make the wrong choice or linger too long, you might find yourself staring down a fairy, a demon, or a god. Not necessarily what the average person wants, you know? These otherworldly beings usually live their lives unseen and unsensed by us, but at crossroads their actions might become more apparent. Some crossroads might even feature a fairy dog or two. These four-legged fiends guard the entrance. They're known for glowing bright green, making sure you don't mistake them for a regular dog. And if you see one, it's best to turn around. They'll bark twice as a warning. Alright, 2, remember that. And don't worry if you think you might miss one of these barks, they're as loud and commanding as they come. But if you do not heed this warning and the dog gets out a third bark, you are doomed. Sure, good things come in threes, just not this time. Hey guys, if you're liking the video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, it really helps us with the algorithm. On with the list. Coming in number 3, we've got the knocker. You would think that mining is scary enough as is, right? Heading into underground tunnels to blast away at rocks until you find some useful materials, hopefully not getting caved in, probably not running out of oxygen, etc. Well, this dangerous career comes with its own share of folklore too, just to make sure that some unexplainable spooks become even spookier. The knocker is a mining monster. Based on the sounds of underground work, it is a spirit that lives within the same tunnels that the helmet-wearing workers descend into every day. Apparently the knocker is the ghost of a tin miner. It's 2 feet tall with a big head, long beard, and arms that almost drag along the ground. Being the ghost of a miner, it carries all the necessary equipment from lamps to pickaxes. Folks familiar with mining might know about the knocking sounds that echo throughout. This is a very scary sound as it can often be indicative of a cave-in. The actual knocking came from the creaking of earth and timbers before giving way, but to some of the miners the noise came from these malevolent spirits attempting to knock down the walls. There are actually all sorts of knocker-related tales, ranging from benevolent to malevolent, but sometimes remaining largely benign. But the scariest additions are those who went around the different tunnels stealing equipment and food, leaving the miners in terrible situations. Sometimes they would even purposefully misdirect miners, leaving them lost in the labyrinth of mine shafts and passages. Worst of all, they're associated with mine fires, which are absolutely horrifying. So make sure you toss the last bite of your meat pie into the mine for the knockers, lest you find yourself in a whole world of trouble. Coming in at number 2, we've got Bogarts. Nasty, nasty creatures these ones are. A lot of folks are familiar with them thanks to the Harry Potter universe, but the idea of rotten little buggers ruining everything has been around for a lot longer than that. Household spirits looking to cause as much trouble as possible, Bogarts are something nobody ever wants to deal with. They're famous for making possessions disappear, causing milk to sour, and having dogs walk lame. Definitely not fun. And once you've found yourself in the upsetting company of one, good luck getting rid of it. They will stick with your family no matter where you go, no matter how far you run. Your things will keep disappearing, your food will keep going bad, and you'll always be haunted by the knowledge that an awful little is making all of it happening. But don't even think about reasoning with a boggart. Sure, they were once helpful brownies or silkies, but something offended them or caused them to feel mistreated, and now they are just pure bad. Even if you offer to make a deal or treat it nicely from now on, it will respond very negatively. It will get furious and wreck all of your stuff in one go instead of doing it mischievously over the course of many years. So yeah, it's like a poltergeist you can't escape, but somehow worse. Folks that have to deal with these, not happy folks.
Alright, kicking off the list at number 5, we have Banshee, the Irish Banshee. Scream like a banshee, there's a line you've probably heard in movies or songs, but what the hell is a banshee anyways? I've never been to a zoo and then seen a banshee before. It's not something I've done. It's actually a reference to the woman of the fairies. Irish folklore says that if you hear this woman scream, that means a family member is going to die. What a harsh and gruesome warning. The Irish banshee is said to live in the forest, but she still is connected to you. Okay, so the scream, her scream, can be heard from very far away. So yeah, it's a warning, a terrifying warning that's pretty loud. You're not gonna miss it. It's said that each family has their own banshee, which is the interesting part. She has a different appearance for each family, so there's not one specific look for her. I mean, some accounts report her to be super tall and lanky, like moi, where other reports have been between, 1 to 4 feet. And the wardrobe, super fitting for the tale. She sometimes rocks the gray cloak over the green dress, and other times she goes out in all white with the red hair. She will warn you of a death by screaming. This is important. But most of the time, it's said that she only appears with the descendants of the pure Milesian stock of Ireland. So surnames that prefix with O and Mac. What about MC? Is that close enough? Like Mick, Mac, O? Am I cool? Am I good? Like in X-Men First Class, the movie, we see one of the main characters named Banshee, and their powers are screaming really loud. So even in our popular culture today, this legend has still managed to stay afloat. What about you guys? Does anybody out there have their own Banshee that they want to talk about or share stories? Is your last name dangerously close to it like mine, McWaters? Let us know down below. And before we continue with our list, guys, if you haven't already, please give us a spooky thumbs up because it helps us pay the bills for our electrical chairs in the basement here, So thanks. Anyways, back to European folklore. Coming in at number 4, we have the basilisk. Originating from Europe and North Africa, the basilisk is a hybrid between a rooster and a lizard. How fun. It was born from an egg laid by a rooster and incubated by a toad. It's kind of like Jurassic Park, but more fun, more terrifying, I don't know, depends. But it didn't always take that shape exactly. So early accounts of the basilisk say that it started off as a small crowned snake and would simply kill by using its poison and evil gaze. Of course, you can't forget the gaze. And it even leaves a trail of venom, as if that wasn't enough. So you know where not to go, rather. In Christian mythology, the basilisk represents hell, yet some places it represents power. Like it became the symbol of the Swiss city Basel. It's believed to be the most poisonous creature ever, and apparently once it was killed by a spear from somebody on a horse, and the venom was so strong that it flowed up through the spear and killed the man and the horse. Not the horse? Come on, guys. Even the herbs around it died because the air was tainted of poison. And if there's a well near it, that water becomes poisoned forever. I mean, there's nothing a little crystal light can't fix though, right? Sip water, you're like, no, this one's tainted for sure. And then it became known as this large hybrid creature with a loud roar.
Do the roar.
You don't want anything. How about one of those famous Shrek roars?
Do the roar.
And of course, it's known to breathe fire. Another common interpretation is that the basilisk from Harry Potter. So in Chamber of Secrets, we see Harry fight the basilisk, and it takes on the appearance of a very, very large snake. Greek mythology always has the coolest stuff. Damn. It also appeared in the 2016 film Gods of Egypt.
And how do you know they have a weak spot? I don't, but they must, right?
In a much less exciting cinematic way than Harry Potter. I'd say. And coming in at number 3, we have the Gjenganger. Making its origins in Norway and Denmark, there have been many different depictions of the Gjenganger, of course. Always so many depictions. The most popular being that of a spirit or ghost of the recently deceased. Now, that just sounds like any ghost in general, right? But what makes the Gjenganger stand out is that its name translates to against or towards, and also a footwalker. So the name itself also implies to walking after death. People who committed suicide were usually the ones who came back as a Gjenganger. Or perhaps before they passed away, there was something else that they had to do in order to be at peace, so they went back to do that. Whatever the case may be, the Gjenganger usually needs assistance from somebody in the living world. Now that's where things get a bit spookier. See, in Scandinavian tradition, the Gjenganger isn't a malicious or evil entity, just a spirit that comes back to say, what's up, you know, how you guys doing? How's dinner? Are you still cooking? Nah, awesome, and then disappears. Whereas other traditions, it's like a violent thing. You know, you didn't want a loved one coming back in this form. It was malicious. Relatives actually went the extra mile to make sure that your grave was properly sealed to avoid this, or else you would get the dead man's pinch. Now the dead man's pinch, no, it's not a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and it sounds pretty scary, but you don't want to be on the receiving end of the dead man's pinch. It happens when you're asleep, because when you wake up, your skin would be blue and sunken, you know? Usually being attacked in your sleep means that you shouldn't be resting near a certain area. So maybe you're too close to a graveyard or too close to like these mountains. I mean, just throw a sign up, that works too. You don't have to pinch or bite any of us. So this undead zombie vampire combo would also break into your homes to spread disease. How fun. 6 feet apart, guys, come on, read the thing. Wear masks, space out. The tradition of the Gjenganger traces back to the early Viking ages as well, believe it or not. They're present in many of the Icelandic sagas, such as the saga of Eric the Red, taking the form of a mortal creature, and then Grendir is also said to have slayed the Gjenganger with his sword. Cool, it's always fun when you slay one of those. And number 2, the Likho. Heading over to explore some Slavic folklore where the Likho is otherwise known as the embodiment of all evil and misfortune. Now, if that doesn't sound horrible enough, their appearance is sure to get you. She's described as being an old lady dressed in all black, but she has one eye that peers out. And it's haunting looking, very. It's also known as a male that resembles a goblin, so either way, they're both not that fun. My personal favorite tale of the Likho is that some said it's taller than trees, like it's a cyclops almost, which is great. So what's the point of the Likho? Why the late night strolls bestowing bad fortune? Well, the Likho, and I'll keep saying Likho because I can't read, the Likho is known to be the servant of death. So during pre-Christian times, villages would conduct these rituals during times of epidemic, and a female-like idol would be built to be used as kindle to ignite a sacrificial fire. They thought, hey, if we destroy a version of it in the fire, then the epidemic would be dispelled. Then, of course, later on, it was linked to bad luck and death. The Likho is said to stalk its victims by perching on a fence or in a tree, just watching you from afar. And in many fairy tales, it's said that the Likho would jump onto your back and have its hands on you so tightly that even if you flailed around, it wouldn't let go. And while it was biting your neck, people would try and run into a body of water, hoping that it would drown, or at least let go. I mean, come on. And that wasn't the case. This was often the cause of their untimely death. See, the Likho doesn't cause their victim to drown, but death is usually the result of the victim trying to get rid of it. So it makes it look like it's your fault in a way. There is a tale of a blacksmith who encountered the Likho and made a pretty wild deal. So as the Likho was preparing to eat the blacksmith, he offers to craft anything the creature wants. So, of course, she asks for another eye, a new eye. The blacksmith insisted that the Likho be strapped down during this, because if she moved while the eye was being hammered in, it just wouldn't work out, right? It would make it worse, if anything. So once she was strapped down, the blacksmith took a red hot poker and jabbed her other eye out. That's crazy, that's like some Bruce Willis stuff right there. The blacksmith escaped by pretending to be a sheep, so the Likho didn't notice him when all the sheep had left the shed. Gotta love those handy sheepskin coats laying around. And coming in at number 1, Fear Liath, the big gray man, and no, I don't mean Gandalf. Also known as Fear Liath Moor, this one comes from Scottish mythology, and it's probably one that you've heard of in one way or another. It's known as a possible guardian of another dimension. Coming in at superhuman size, its dreadful presence can cause suicidal thoughts. The big gray man of Ben Macdui is said to be a distant cousin or somehow related to Bigfoot. That's why they look so big and hairy and similar. As they share similar appearances, of course, the mountain Dearg Due is home to this fantastic beast that you don't want to find. Many glimpses of the Fear Liath have been stated that it's blurry, kind of like how all the photo evidence we have of Bigfoot is blurry itself. Many believe the cameras simply just weren't good enough to capture a clear image, but the blurry feature is said to be part of its ghostly nature. See, it's this tall, sinister, blurry gray creature. Science argues the existence of the Fear Liath, saying that the appearances of the creature are simply an illusion caused by atmospheric conditions atop high mountains, where the shadows of somebody can be cast far away and look like this large giant phantom. So this ape creature has also been beloved to the missing link in our evolution. People think this is like the half man, half ape right in the middle thing. What do you guys think? The shadow of death itself, or just the shadow of Fred the mountain hiker? Which one? One of the common feelings you get when being in the presence of Fear Liath is dread and panic. Now, many believe that this happens when you're climbing a mountain and there's not enough oxygen getting to your brain. That plus the anxieties of being on a mountain thousands of feet in the air, your brain will play tricks on you. But some tales are too convincing. One of the earliest sightings took place back in 1890 by John Norman Collie, a respected scientist and explorer who was walking in cairngorms, and a heavy mist appeared as he arrived atop of Dearg Due mountain. This fog reduced his visibility, and he didn't talk about his experience for 35 years. That's a long time to keep a secret. That's wild. He heard footsteps behind him crunching that didn't match his own walking pace. And then he described this creature that he saw. It was large with broad shoulders, over 10 feet tall, with long waving arms. He also said it had an olive-like complexion, or rather covered in short brown hair. But in majority of these cases, the creature is only heard or sensed. So if you're thinking of grabbing a Polaroid and hitting the slopes, you won't be too lucky.
Coming in at 5, Black Annis. Black Annis, also known as Black Agnes or Black Anna, is a boogeyman figure in English folklore. She is imagined as a blue-faced hag or witch with iron claws and a taste for human flesh, especially children. It is said that she haunts the countryside of Leicestershire, living in a cave in the Dane Hills with a great oak tree at the entrance. At night she is known to venture out looking for unsuspecting children and lambs to eat, then tanning their skin by hanging them on a tree before wearing them around her waist. Legend goes that she used her iron claws to dig her cave out of the side of a sandstone cliff, making herself a home there, which is now referred to as Black Annis Bower Close. This legend actually led to parents warning their children that Black Annis would come and get them if they did not behave. She was also known to hide in the branches of her oak tree, waiting to leap upon unsuspecting prey. Now, in other traditions, it is said that Black Annis would grind her teeth, which folks would hear, giving them time to bolt their doors and keep away from the window. Otherwise, she would reach in and snatch them. It is also said that cottages in Leicestershire were built with small windows to deter Black Annis. She could only reach one arm inside. Coming in at 4, Changeling. A changeling is a human-like creature found in folklore throughout Europe, particularly British folklore. It was believed that a changeling was a fairy child that had been left in place of a human child stolen by the fairies. A changeling is typically identifiable via a number of traits. A fairy child may appear sickly and won't grow in size like a normal child, and may have notable physical characteristics such as a beard or long teeth. Now, to quote D.L. Ashelman, a human child might be taken due to many factors: to act as a servant, the love of a human child, or malice. Most often it was thought that fairies exchanged the children. In rare cases, the very elderly of the fairy people would be exchanged in the place of a human baby, so that the old fairy could live in comfort being coddled by its human parents. Simple charms such as an inverted coat or open iron scissors left where the child sleeps were thought to ward them off. Other measures included a constant watch over the child. Now, in the Anglo-Scottish border region, it was believed that elves or fairies lived in elf hills or fairy hills. Along with this belief in supernatural beings was the view that they could spirit away children and even adults and take them back to their own world. Often it was thought a baby would be snatched and replaced with a simulation of the baby, usually a male adult fairy to be suckled by the mother. The real baby would be treated well by the elves and would grow up to be one of them, whereas the changeling baby would be discontented and wearisome. Coming in at 3, Black Shuck. Also known as Old Shuck, Old Shock, or simply Shuck, this is the name given to an East Anglian ghostly black dog which is said to roam the coastline and countryside of East Anglia, one of the many ghostly black dogs recorded in folklore across the British Isles. Accounts of Black Shuck form part of the folklore of Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire Fens, and Essex. Now, the description of Black Shuck varies in both shape and size, from that of a large dog to being the size of a calf or a horse. To quote W.A. Dutt in his 1901 Highways and Byways in East Anglia, he takes the form of a huge black dog and prowls along dark lanes and lonesome field footpaths where, although his howling makes the hearer's blood run cold, his footfalls make no sound. You may know him at once, should you see him, by his fiery eyes. He has but one, and that, like the Cyclops, is in the middle of his head. But such an encounter might bring you the worst of luck. It is even said that to meet him is to be warned that your death will occur before the end of the year. So you will do well to shut your eyes if you hear him howling. Shut them even if you are uncertain whether it is the dog fiend or the voice of the wind you hear. Should you never set eyes on our Norfolk Snarlio, you may perhaps doubt his existence and, like other learned folks, tell us that his story is nothing but the old Scandinavian myth of the Black Hound of Odin, brought to us by the Vikings who long ago settled down on the Norfolk coast. Coming in at 2, Jenny Greenteeth. Jenny Greenteeth, also known as the Wicked Jenny, is a river hag similar to Peg Powler or Grindy Low. She would pull children or the elderly into the water and drown them. The name is also used to describe pondweed or duckweed, which can form a continuous mat over the surface of a small body of water, making it misleading and potentially treacherous, especially to unwary children. Now, Jenny Greenteeth was often described as green-skinned with long hair and sharp teeth. She is called Ginny Greenteeth in Lancashire and North Staffordshire, but in Cheshire and Shropshire she is called Wicked Jenny, Ginny Greenteeth, or Jeannie Greenteeth. She is sometimes described as lurking in the upper branches of trees at night, although this may be a folklorist confusion. She became so infamous around Britain that she inspired a slew of characters in pop culture. Jenny inspired the lake monster Meg Mucklebones in the 1985 Ridley Scott fantasy film Legend. She is also the title character in a book of short stories, Jenny Greenteeth and Other Short Stories. She is also the main subject of a poem Welsh Maiden by Joel Hayway. She also appears in a number of Dungeons & Dragons adventure modules, including DDEX01 Tales Treat Hell, DDAL0401 Suits of the Mist, DDAL0406 The Ghost, and DDAL0414 The Dark Lord. And finally, coming in at number 1, Beast of Bodmin Moor. In British folklore, the Beast of Bodmin Moor, also known as the Beast of Bodmin, is a phantom wildcat purported to live in Cornwall, England, United Kingdom. The location became a centre for sightings after 1978, with occasional reports of mutilated slain livestock. The alleged panther-like cats of the same region came to be popularly known as the Beast of Bodmin Moor. One hypothesis suggests the possibility that alien big cats were at large in the United Kingdom and could have been imported as part of private collections of zoos, later escaped or were even set free. An escaped cat would not have been reported to the authorities due to the illegality of owning and importing the animals. During one occasion, a boy was walking by the River Fowey when he discovered a large cat skull measuring about 4 inches long by 7 inches wide. The skull was lacking its lower jaw but possessed 2 sharp, prominent canines that suggested it might have been a leopard. The story, of course, hit the national press before it was sent to the Natural History Museum in London. Now, in general, scientists reject such claims because of the improbably large numbers necessary to maintain a breeding population, and because climate and food supply issues would make such purported creatures' survival in reported habitats very unlikely.
Kicking off at number 5, the Questing Beast. And what better place to begin our folkloric journey than with the ultimate adversary of all things monster hunting in the long history of the British Isles, the Questing Beast. And yeah, whilst the name may be a dead giveaway, in folklore there is perhaps no other creature that is quite as bizarre as this one. Otherwise known as the Beaglatistion or the Barking Beast, this particular creature is a key monster in Arthurian legend, and in the forgotten days of King Arthur's Britain, his Knights of the Round Table, most prominently Sir Palomides and Sir Percival, made it their quest to hunt this thing down. As the legend goes, this strange creature had the head and neck of a snake, the body of a leopard, the haunches of a lion, and the cloven feet of a hart. The name, primarily Beaglatistion, comes from the great noise that it emits from its belly, a barking noise that allegedly sounded like 30 couple hounds questing. Bizarrely enough though, the legend of the Questing Beast is allegedly a variant of the mythological medieval view on giraffes. Do with that information as you will, but yeah, that's anyone's guess. Perhaps the most memorable appearance of the questing beast in Arthurian legend was in Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, where after he had an affair with his half-sister Morgan, they didn't know they were related at the time, just FYI, the questing beast appears to Arthur in a disturbing vision drinking from a clear and still pool. In that same dream, he sees a prophecy that foretells Mordred's destruction of Camelot, and he then intertwines the two. Later on, Merlin reveals to Arthur that the questing beast was actually born of a human woman, a princess who lusted after her own brother. Sound familiar? While in the legend told by Merlin, eventually the brother was sentenced to death by their own father and was torn to shreds by rabid dogs, the same sound that the questing beast made. Essentially, Arthur saw his own near downfall in a dream, and the questing beast was the result of that. Yeah, exactly. Star Wars ain't got nothing on this. Swinging in at number 4, the Dearg Due. As William Congreve wrote in his 1697 play The Mourning Bride, "Nor hell a fury like a woman scorned." The Dearg Due is perhaps Ireland's most tragic and fearsome tale of that fact, one that is still whispered at grave sites and burials to this day. Surprisingly enough, in terms of horror, the Dearg Due is perhaps a lot more recognisable than we may have first imagined. In fact, loosely meaning red blood sucker, this terrifying visage of folklore horror is the closest that Celtic mythology has come to detailing the archetypal vampire. As the legend goes, thousands of years ago, she was a legendary beauty with blood-red lips and pale blonde hair, and her true name has since been lost to the ages, overshadowed by the folklore villain she became. As kind as she was beautiful, the Dearg Due was the envy of every clan in Ireland, and suitors lined up to win her hand in marriage. As fate would have it though, this sweet-natured girl fell in love with a local peasant, an equally handsome man who was kind and well-natured too, but alas, he was penniless. Eventually, the girl's father instead agreed for an old and violently cruel man to marry her, securing a fortune in the process. He kept her locked in a tower and had an affinity for making her bleed. Day after day, he tortured her, locked away in a tower cell, while she waited in vain for the kind peasant boy to somehow come and rescue her. That hope alone kept her alive for many months, but one day, when all hope was gone, she took her own life. As the legend tells it, the Dearg Due is buried in a small churchyard near Strongbow's Tree in the southeast of Ireland. But that wasn't the end of her. In death, she rose from the earth that same night she was buried, driven mad by the half-remembered visions of her own blood welling on her own skin, thirsty for revenge. As they tell it, every night the Dearg Due rises as the red blood drinker, hunting down young men in a blind and natural revenge. She calls to them in a strange, haunting siren song that lingers in their mind as they sleep, where they eventually follow her to her grave and she feasts on them. The Dearg Due is as tragic as it is violent, and it's a cautionary tale that leaves little to be desired. Next up at number 3, the Caorthannach. And on the same theme as the Dearg Due, there is perhaps no other female figure of folklore that is more terrifying than the legendary Caorthannach. And this one, instead of drawing upon the tragic image of the forsaken daughter turned ravenous blood-drinking vampire, this one instead takes the visage of the mother. And not just any archetypal mother. No, oh no, but instead the mother of the devil himself, the fire spitter, the mother of all demons, and one of the greatest adversaries in the whole of Irish mythology. As the legend goes, when the planet was nothing but a swirling mass of vapour, water and rock, Caorthannach was hatched deep in the molten core of the planet. There for eons upon eons she waited, patiently biding her time before we humans stepped into existence. You see, the fire spitter needed food for her children to feast upon, and guess what? We were that food. And in the early days of humanity, the mother of demons and her children feasted upon us in a frenzy. However, there is one turning point of this legend where something remarkable happened, and believe it or not, but the legend of Caorthannach is actually inexplicably tied to the patron saint of Ireland himself, Patrick. Well, he went by Patricius back then, but still. Strangely enough, when the legend of St. Patrick is attributed to his removal of all of the snakes from Ireland in some folkloric canons, those very same snakes are instead the fire spitter and her children. As the legend goes, Patrick had traced Caorthannach's home back to the cave on Station Island, which also allegedly served as a portal to Hell. There they battled for 2 days and 2 nights before the fire spitter retreated through the swamps and poisoned all of the wells on her way. Eventually the pair fought in a great lake where the mother of demons swallowed St. Patrick whole as they both sank into the cold, shadowy darkness of Loch Dearg. Thankfully for him though, St. Patrick tore his way out of her belly and she was banished to the dark, miserable depths for eternity. Thank you very much, St. Patrick. And finally coming in at number 1 spot, Balor. And truth be told, we can't really have any other creation of folklore as our number one spot. Balor, the big bad baddie of Celtic mythology, is a figure that features most proficiently in the mythos of Irish and Scottish folklore, whereas on the one hand we have the mythical Tuatha Dé Danann, on the other we have the Fomorians, a supernatural race of monstrosities who shamble their way from the bowels of the earth to wreak havoc on we humans and engage in an eternal battle with the Fae. In Celtic mythology, this guy is the tyrant leader of them all. He is often described as a giant with one single large eye that wreaks destruction wherever it casts its gaze. Where have we heard that one before? Perhaps derived from the common Celtic word Balaros, meaning the deadly one, Balor is the be-all and end-all of destruction and devastation in the ancient history of the British Isles. Believed to be the personification of blight and drought, it was written in prophecy that Balor would eventually be slain by his own grandson, Lug, who would become the storm god of Celtic mythology and bring an end to the suffering that Balor wrought. From his fortress on Tory Island, in many myths and legends, Balor is described as a giant eye at the top of a tower that when opened carves a path of destruction in its wake. As many legends tell it, once open, it could destroy entire armies with a single glance. Although in many other instances Balor is a humanoid figure that walks beside men, as some folklorists described, he had a single eye in his forehead, a venomous fiery eye. There were always 7 coverings over this eye, and one by one Balor removed them. With the first, the bracken began to wither, with the second, the grass became copper coloured, with the third, the woods and the timber began to heat, with the fourth, smoke came from the trees, with the fifth, everything grew red, with the sixth, it sparked, and with the seventh, they were all set on fire and the whole countryside was ablaze. You see, whichever way you spin it, Balor was the personification of pretty much all evil in Celtic mythology and folklore, and when it comes to big bad baddies, yeah, they don't get much nastier than this guy.
Number 5 on this list is the Jorogumo. So before we get too deep into this entry, I want to start off by saying that I hate spiders. As a kid, they were my worst fear, and I just had like zero love for them at all. And that's what makes the Jorogumo especially terrifying to me. Jorogumo are terrifying demon creatures who resemble large, dangerous spiders. They have the ability to shapeshift though, and can sometimes appear as beautiful women. Gajinpo says, translated to English, Jorogumo means woman spider. However, the kanji can also mean entangling bride or whore spider. They are cunning and appear as seductive young women. They feed on young men who fall for their tricks, trapping them in their webs and devouring them slowly. There are several stories based on the Jorogumo. In Tonogusa, a young warrior encounters a beautiful woman. Realizing she's a yokai, he strikes her with his sword and she flees to the attic. There, they find a dead spider about 30 centimeters long and surrounded by decaying bodies. In Izu, Joran Falls is home to a Jorogumo. The legend says a woodcutter encountered the spider when she tried to drag him behind the waterfall. He escaped, warning the village to stay away, but an outsider met the Jorogumo. Surprisingly, she let him live as long as he never spoke of it. Unfortunately, the man was the opposite of coy. The story diverges from there, but most virgins end with him entangled in spiderweb and wishing he'd kept his mouth shut. So not only am I not a fan of spiders, but I'm also a young man, literally the exact food that this beast is determined that they like. Also, how the heck am I supposed to know if this nice pretty lady just wants to go out for coffee with me or put me in her web and eat me? The legend is thought to make people question their choice in partners more, but if it's actually true, then be very careful of the Jorogumo. Number 4 on this list is the Nurikabe. Nurikabe is super interesting and very different from a lot of other entries that we have on this list. I suppose that's because, in all honesty, these Nurikabe are a bit more derpy than they are scary. However, if you underestimate them or don't treat them as a threat, then that's where you're going to run into problems. The name Nurikabe translates to plaster wall, and that's a very good description of what these creatures actually are. These creatures are said to manifest as a big wall that blocks the way of travelers, an invisible obstacle that will appear to foreigners and send them in weird directions. They're so tall that you can't climb over them, and you won't be able to go around them. You'll be forced to change your direction. This is the extent to what the Nurikabe will do. They aren't gonna hunt you down and kill you. They're not gonna cause natural disasters or curse you or anything like that. They'll just block your path. And even though this doesn't seem like a big deal, well, it kind of is. The amount of stories that people have had about getting dangerously lost out in the middle of nowhere due to these things is insane. These are just the stories that actually get back to the public too, because a lot of times people never make it back to society. These wall creatures prey on those unfamiliar with the area, so you'll naturally completely lose your bearings if you need to go around them. These days, Nurikabe aren't super menacing because we live in a world with cell phones and a GPS, but back when we didn't have such things, these were extremely dangerous. Locals would always warn people before they went on journeys to be careful of the Nurikabe and always keep track of where they'd been. A mischievous plaster wall who back in the day took quite a few lives. Number 3 on this list is the Kappa. Kappa are gross little creatures that can be very tricky and menacing. Gajinpa says this small human-like creature has a shell like a turtle, green scaly skin, and a plate on its head that must be filled with water at all times to stay alive. They live in Japan's rivers, lakes, and other waterways. In Shintoism, Kappa are respected as gods of water, and statues of them can be sometimes found at shrines around Japan. Kappa quirks include having an affinity for cucumbers and never breaking a promise. In the urban legend version, a more menacing Kappa loves to pull lost children and animals into the water to drown and eat. They still like to eat cucumbers, but also raw human intestines. Cucumbers! Cool, love it. Human intestines, not so cool, don't love it. For any of our Pokemon fans out there, these little guys remind me a lot of the Pokemon Lombre, which would be really cute if they weren't trying to steal our children and animals and then also devour them. Now, it's unclear if these Kappa ever were humans at one point or if they're just a mythical animal. A lot of their characteristics are similar to humans, so it wouldn't surprise me if somehow these creatures evolved from humans or maybe devolved in this case. Either way, human or not, these beasts may look cute on the outside, but they're not to be trifled with. Keep your kids and your pets close if you intend to take a stroll by some Japanese rivers anytime soon. Number 2 on this list is the Onryo. Onryo are not the sort of spirits that you want to be bringing to some sort of social gathering. Not only because they are super dangerous and could literally kill you, but honestly, they're just a major buzzkill. The word Onryo translates to vengeful spirit or wrathful spirit, and in folklore and legend, that's pretty much exactly what they are. Vengeful spirits who have returned to the world of the living with the goal of causing harm to those who wronged them when they were living. These spirits have the power to manipulate things in our physical world, and I'm not just talking about opening a door or something small like that. They can fully change the weather and cause natural disasters to hit entire cities. This is extremely scary because if an entire city, let's say, wronged this spirit while they were alive, then they're going to exact their revenge on that entire city. Now, a lot of times these spirits are portrayed as women with jet black hair and a very pale and almost deathly complexion. It doesn't have to be women though. That's just simply how the media has shown them to be up until this point. A male Onryo could be just as likely if that spirit is holding on to some serious trauma from their life in the living. Usually people who have been murdered or had their entire lives ruined due to the selfishness of others will become Onryo. It's a lesson to all people that are living to be kind to those around you, not only just because that it's the right thing to do, but also because having an Onryo come after you isn't the best idea. And number 1 on this list is the Gashadokuro. So this mythical being is really not something that you'd want to run into. Gajinpa writes, the poor unfortunate bones of those who perished on the battlefield turn into the Gashadokuro. These yokai form in places where masses of normal skeletons lie, such as in villages after famine or disease has wiped out the population. Because they died without a proper burial or funeral rites, the souls and bones come together and create one giant skeleton 15 times the size of an average person. The skeleton specters feed on lone travelers, biting their heads off, feasting on their bones, and drinking their blood. Dracula style, guys. It's like some sort of boss from Castlevania. And it truly does feel like a boss in a video game or television show. A 15-foot tall giant skeleton that's been made from the dead bodies of the soldiers who perished here. Like, really think about how horribly terrifying a creature like this would be. You would also have no possible chance of winning in a battle against it, because how can you kill something that's already dead? Yokai says the earliest record of a Gashadokuro goes back over 1,000 years to a bloody rebellion against the central government by a samurai named Tera no Masakado. His daughter Takayashi Hime was a famous sorceress. When Masako was eventually killed for his revolt, his daughter continued his cause. Using her black magic, she summoned a great skeleton gelatin from the bodies of dead soldiers to attack the city of Kyoto. If this beast of a creature can take on an entire city by itself, then I definitely don't want to be running into it by my lonesome.
Number 5 on this list is the El Culebron. I'd never heard of this legend before, and I have to admit that it's pretty cool. This creature is native to Chile, and although it'd be pretty neat to look at from afar, it's definitely very dangerous. Scoop Whoop says El Culebron is basically an enormous hairy snake with a gigantic calf-like head. It's said that the creature resides inside of dark caves or remote forests, and it eats basically anything in its path. Legend also has it that the snake can draw wealth to anyone who's able to domesticate it, but trapping a Culebron is no easy feat. You have to find one in the wild, pluck 3 of its longest hair strands without getting eaten, and then put it in a bowl of milk. From that bowl, 3 baby Culebron will spring to life, and the strongest will eat the other 2 and become a full-fledged Culebron. From that point forward, owners have to maintain the snakes with sacrifices of animals or close relatives and leave the blood in a secret location that only the snake knows of. A very unique legend if you ask me. A very deadly, giant snake creature that has the ability to bring you great wealth, but only if you can breed one and domesticate it. The story that I read off doesn't go into deep detail on how they actually bring you wealth, which would definitely be of interest to me. Maybe they're kind of like truffle-sniffing pigs, except instead of truffles, they can smell gold or rare gems or something like that. Probably the reason that we don't know for sure how they bring us wealth is because so few have actually been able to be domesticated. First off, finding one of these creatures would be very hard, because it means you'd need to trek through the jungles and mountains of Chile. Then, after finding one of the rarest creatures in the world, you also need to fight one of the most deadly creatures in the world and pluck 3 hair strands off of it. Then you need to fully domesticate another one of these beasts in your home after you grow it from a bowl of milk. There is a lot of room for error here, guys, and I doubt that many people have been able to complete all of the steps. Keep an eye out though for the El Culebron if you find yourself in Chile. Number 4 on this list is La Llorona. La Llorona is also known to many as the Weeping Woman. She is the ghostly apparition of a vengeful spirit who roams around by the water bemoaning the loss of her children whom she'd actually drowned herself. Scoop Whoop writes, according to a popular version of the tale, the Weeping Woman was once a beautiful maiden named Maria. She married a nobleman and gave birth to 2 sons. Her husband was a traveler and he rarely visited home. During their time apart, his feelings for her began to dull, but her husband still loved his sons and gave them all the attention that he left his wife bereft of. Once when he was in town, she caught him with a younger woman. Enraged, she took her sons to Santa Fe River and drowned them. She also was found dead on the riverbank a few days later, the cause of which remained unknown. It's said that when she reached heaven, she was denied entry until she found the souls of her sons. Thus, she wanders the earth looking to reclaim their souls. Dressed in a white gown and mourning for her sons, La Llorona takes lost and abandoned children and drowns them in hopes of recovering souls that will allow her entry into the afterlife. What an absolutely horrible woman. Clearly killing her own children really didn't teach her anything at all, because now she's out there killing other people's children. This is a really scary legend in Mexico, and it's often why parents don't let their children go to areas with water by themselves. There's also the fear that La Llorona will be lurking somewhere around there thinking that she can use the souls of the young children instead of her own. You'd think that she would have realized by now that faking the souls of other people to get into heaven isn't gonna work, but by the sounds of it, she really doesn't sound like the brightest bulb in the bunch. Bright or not, she's still very dangerous, so be very careful whenever you're around water in Latin America. Number 3 on this list is La Ciguapa. La Ciguapa are interesting mythical creatures that are located in the Dominican Republic. They can be found in forests and around the rivers and lakes of the country. At first glance, they may look like a woman with long hair. However, upon closer inspection, one will see very unique characteristics. Their backwards facing feet. That's right, guys, their feet actually face towards their own body, and this is one of the main differences between this creature and your standard human. Many people haven't paid close close enough attention to this detail, and because of that have been tricked into thinking that this is an actual woman. A fatal mistake if one of these things decides that you'd make for some good prey. The typical target of this creature are men that find themselves exploring the forest. These creatures are said to be incredibly smart and can often outwit the people that they run into. Also, rather surprisingly, their backwards feet make them run very fast, so even if you do catch on to this creature's intentions, running away would be very hard to do. The earliest mention of this creature was back in 1866, and since then there have been many stories written about these creatures. Those lucky enough to have an interaction and then make it out alive have documented their findings and tried to warn others from wandering into the forests unarmed. Sadly, these warnings aren't always heeded, and many men have disappeared over the years, never to be heard of again. Trekking through the lush forests of the Dominican Republic is already dangerous as is and requires lots of planning. Just don't forget to also plan for the last Ciguapa if you do find yourself in this country. Number 2 on this list is the Yacumama. Ever seen the movie Anaconda? 1997 movie with J-Lo and Owen Wilson, all about a super massive snake that starts hunting this filmmaker? Well, I wouldn't be shocked if that snake was based off of the legend of the Yacumama. Cryptid Wiki says the Yacumama is a large snake up to 60 meters in length that is said to inhabit the Amazon River basin. Local shamans say that the Yacumama travels to an area called the Boiling River. In the local legends, the Yacumama is said to be the mother of all marine life. It has the ability to suck up any living thing that passed within 100 paces. The locals would blow on a conch horn before entering the river, believing after hearing the noise, the serpent would reveal itself if it was in the area. I can't describe to you guys how massive 60 meters in length would actually be. Titanoboa was an ancient creature that actually existed in the Amazon. It was a massive snake, the biggest the world has ever seen, that ruled over these parts and could swallow crocodiles whole. That creature at its max would grow up to 50 feet in length or 15 meters. So basically, Yacumama is 4 times the size of the biggest and deadliest snake that's ever lived. This thing would be able to annihilate hundreds of humans at once. Even if the locals did blow on their conch and the snake did reveal itself, then there would literally be nothing that they could do. It would just eat them all, and that would be that. Snakes are super cool, but not when they're 60 meters long and looking to devour me. Number 1 on this list is the Peuchen. Peuchen are very dangerous and deadly beasts and should not be underestimated under any circumstances. Cryptid Wiki says, the Peuchen, a creature from the Mapuche mythology and Chilote mythology pertaining to southern Chile, was a feared shapeshifter which could instantly change into anything. It's often been described as a gigantic flying snake that produced strange whistling sounds, while its gaze could paralyze an intended victim and permit it to suck its blood. It's often been reported as sucking blood from sheep. The creature can be eliminated by a maki. So maki, in case you aren't familiar, are medicine women, and they're believed to be the only people capable of defeating this beast. Meaning that you could be the strongest warrior in the world, you could have taken down beasts and enemies in the hundreds before, but you would still fall to the Peuchen if you weren't a maki. It's extremely hard to kill something if you can't even look at it, and that's what this is like. Similar to Medusa in the way that it can paralyze you if you look at it, fighting this beast is near impossible. Aside from its ability to paralyze people, it's also extremely fast, extremely strong, it can fly, and it can also shapeshift into other dangerous creatures. Pray that you never run into this creature, because it will assuredly be the last thing that you ever do.
In at number 5 we have Ong Ba Bi. The Ong Ba Bi is considered to be the Vietnamese version of the boogeyman and is said to have originated in the 17th century. The story of the boogeyman is told throughout the world in many different ways, but in Vietnam it's the Ong Ba Bi that brings fear to children, and parents use it to scare their children into behaving. Many parents in Vietnam threaten their children saying things like "stop crying" or "Ong Ba Bi will come and take you," or "eat your broccoli" or "I'll call Ong Ba Bi." The boogeyman in general doesn't have any specific appearance, and conceptions vary drastically by household and culture. But the Ong Ba Bi is described as an old, rugged man carrying 3 sacks, has 12 eyes, and he likes to kidnap naughty children using and putting them into his sack. When looking at the personality traits of the boogeyman, they are divided into 3 categories. One being the kind that punishes misbehaved children, the kind that are more prone to violence, and the kind that protect the innocent. They all relate in the same way, being that they all exist to teach young children lessons, and that's why the boogeyman boogeyman is directly related to Ong Ba Bi because they are both there to frighten children with punishment and to steal them at night and sometimes even eat them. The Ong Ba Bi only ever comes at night and only kidnaps the children who are misbehaving and not listening to their parents. This so-called mythical creature is said to be invented by parents in order to scare children when they are disobedient and scaring them into having good behavior. Another account says that it was invented based on events happening in the 17th century when starvation ran rapid through Vietnam, and it drove many people into kidnapping children to sell for food, and the Ong Ba Bi is based on those events. Whichever the case, many know these tales regardless of where you're from, and the story of Ong Ba Bi is told by parents to children to this day and is a very fearsome figure to children in Vietnam. Coming in at number 4 we have Ma Da. Children living in areas close to the river are warned about Ma Da, which are vengeful spirits who lurk in bodies of water. They're believed to be the souls of drowned victims that tend to have a childlike appearance, and they manifest as bloated corpses with weeds for hair. It's believed these souls died in torment and they cannot find peace and can only be reincarnated if there is another to take their place. The Ma Da roam in lakes and rivers waiting to drag down unsuspecting swimmers, but it's believed that this is most likely made up to warn children to not go swimming unsupervised because many fatal water-related accidents are very common in Vietnam. Many happenings and stories of the Ma Da come from the infamous Tu Lich, otherwise known as the Cursed River. Back in September 2001, while working to take out some of the excessive mud and trash build-up in the river, a construction team uncovered several wooden piles arranged in a strange formation, including ceramic relics, metal utensils, and even bones from human skeletons. The odd occurrence even made headlines on many different newspapers at the time but had eventually died down. Several years later in 2007, the happenings came up again when Mr. Nijin Hung Kwang, the leader of the construction team, recounting many misfortunes that had happened to him and others who were related to the project since 2001. Some of the things that happened to these men included experiencing nightmares in which they were haunted by ghosts, feelings of being drowned, as well as health issues such as epileptic seizures and other accidents happening to the men's families. Mr. Nunjian even invited a monk to perform a ritual to lift the curse on the river, but the attempt was unsuccessful, and the monk died shortly after visiting. In at number 3 we have Quy Nhap Trang. The Quy Nhap Trang tend to possess the bodies of the recently deceased. Legend has it that when someone passes away and is prepared for burial, it is extremely important to not let a black cat, which is a symbol of bad luck, leap over the coffin. If that does happen, then the body of the deceased will be infested by evil spirits, which then turns into Quy Nhap Trang and chases the living. Other stories claim Quy Nhap Trang are spirits of the dead who prey on the frail, dying people seeking to consume their souls and steal their bodies so they can indulge in earthly pleasures. Older victims are much easier to manipulate and possess, and they are close enough to death even when they do end up passing away. The Quy Nhap Trang stays in their bodies and can live on in that body, enjoy their life on earth. When it inhabits the elderly, they seem to appear reinvigorated but also start to act strangely. Some of the weird things these revived humans do are they ask for lots of food, and very specific foods to feed on, like raw blood and even living animals. These odd behaviors are mistaken for signs of recovery, which why Quy Nhap Trang can live among the living normally for a few days or even weeks before people start noticing the strange behavior. Obviously this person is already dead and their body is taken over and possessed by this demon, and the only way for the Quy Nhap Trang to exit the body is by an exorcism, and then once the evil spirit is expelled, the body will immediately show signs of decay, as if it's been dead for days. Some believe that this legend is exaggerated accounts of the incidents where someone is wrongfully declared dead and wakes up suddenly during their funeral, which is terrifying. In at number 2, Malai. Malai is said to be one of the most terrifying creatures in the Vietnamese folklore. By daytime they are said to walk among us disguised as women, usually looking young, very beautiful, and often appearing tired. I'm always tired. At night, though, it's said that their heads detach from their bodies. They are seen dragging bloody organs alongside them and float around to feast on flesh, organs, and other rancid items. It is also believed that someone whose excrement is consumed by a Malay is cursed with eternal hunger and will eventually die of starvation no matter how much they eat. When sunrise comes, they must return to their human body again, otherwise they'll be burned to death by the sunlight. So the easiest way to vanquish a Malay is to hide their desired body so that she can't reattach her head. Apparently, the Malay story originated from when a woman, believed to be cursed, engaged in various sins and fraudulent activities during her previous life. Then after she died, her sins caused her to be reborn as a horrific demon who lives off dead animals, their organs, excrement, and garbage. There have been many different sightings throughout the 21st century, including strange red lights floating up and down a field in 2016, and then again in 2016 villagers saw strange green and red lights rising up and down in the distance, and people thought it was the Malay due to her glowing appearance when she floats through the night. night. There have also been videos and pictures seen all over social media believing to be the Malai, showing glowing figures hovering around the night sky and eyewitnesses capturing these sightings, and people have no explanation for them. Similar creatures as the Malai can be seen in the folklore of many other Southeast Asian countries including Malaysia, Thailand and Cambodia, where they are known as the other names such as Arp, Krasu or Penanjal, but they all relate back to Malay. And finally in at number 1 we have Than Trung. The Than Trung are evil spirits who torture the souls of the dead. These spirits usually appear as either massive black birds with blood red beaks, or they have massive bird-shaped heads with human-like bodies and glowing red eyes. They also have large wings which help them fly, and they stay close to cemeteries and sit on mountain peaks to have a better view to seek out their next prey, and are able to see who is being buried at each cemetery. They often appear after someone passes away and is newly buried, and they show up next to the new grave. It is said that they torture the newly dead people's souls for information about their living relatives, then the Than Trung hunts down their relatives and reap the souls of those living people, leading to several family members dying within a short period of one another. Apparently the Than Trung must get to the newly buried person within 49 days or they cannot summon their soul. There is even a horror game that came out called The Death Than Trung, which is based off the folklore and was created and developed by Dong Si T and some member of Team Dut in 2021. The game is a first-person psychological horror adventure game that is highly inspired by the demon folklore. The game revolves around the story of a young man who was stuck in an endless nightmare at his inn, and the black and red are the main color tones in the game. It takes place in the city of Hanoi in 2021 and heavily involves the Than Trung and their reign of terror.
Coming in at number 4, we've got the Tsuchigumo. Monsters have been mashed for as long as we can remember, and it's not always a graveyard smash, mind you. Sometimes it's the combination of many real, living creatures to make something extra nightmarish. This is a beast with the body of a tiger, the limbs of a spider, and the face of a demon. Part real mammal, part real, albeit much smaller arachnid, and part mythical monster. Apparently Tsuchigumo were known for eating travelers as they made their way across the countryside. In the remote fields, no one can hear you scream. 1 or 2 traveling morsels wouldn't be enough for them either. In one tale, a powerful warrior took one down and sliced it open, to loot the body. This ancient hero was playing Dungeons and Dragons way before anyone else, setting the stage for countless boss encounters. This thing definitely reeks of big bad guy, although I don't know what kind of DM would unleash such a presence on Earth. Back to the story though. Inside the Tsuchigumo were 1,990 skulls, 10 shy of 2,000. Unbelievable that it would eat so many and barely even digest the skulls. It's a little wasteful if you ask me. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Alp. This creature originates in German folklore and can cause you all sorts of terrible problems. Some liken it to a vampire, others to demons like the incubus. It will visit people at night and sit on their bodies, although they don't usually attempt to initiate sexual acts like incubi and succubi. If the person doesn't wake up, the Alp will often hop into their dreams and control what they see. It's not common for them to give people good dreams either. Nope, it's nightmares end to end. One of the many sleep paralysis demons that exist, the Alp tends to want to cause mischief in as many ways as possible. So it's not necessarily going to kill you or end your suffering anytime soon. It wants to keep the party going. Dream visits and nightmare manipulation are only part of what makes an Alp scary and annoying. It drinks blood from people's nipples and plays all sorts of heinous pranks, from spoiling milk to rediapering babies to tying up horses' tails into knots. These little gremlins are indeed the worst, and they can shapeshift too, so don't expect to just see a little goblin hopping around. It might be a little trickier than that. Don't count on reading Nilbog backwards to save your butt either. What a bag of fun they are. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Jormungandr. This giant snake lives in the ocean surrounding Midgard. It is so large that it encompasses the entire world and then eats its own tail. As I previously mentioned, it's the sibling of Fenrir, which is kind of odd considering that one is a wolf and one is a snake, but hey, Loki definitely got around. Jormungandr is famous for its rivalry with Thor. The two would engage in many legendary battles over the years. One of said tales has Thor fishing in the sea for the serpent. He snags it and starts pulling. As it gets closer to the surface, the giant Mir becomes terrified. He sees Jormungandr dribbling blood and poison and decides to cut the line, sending the snake back down to the depths. Thor was not happy about this development. Later on, of course, the two meet during Ragnarok. One telltale sign that Ragnarok is coming is the violent unrest of the seas. This happens because our slippery pal here has released his tail from his mouth and begins to flop onto land. Once this happens, it will spit poison to fill half the earth. The snake and the god do battle, with Thor emerging victorious but then succumbing to poison. Lose, fellas, that's not how we wanted this to go. Another fun fact about this gigantic serpent is that continental Germans used to attribute earthquakes to its movements, which is especially terrifying in context. Imagine you're a German peasant and an earthquake rolls through. Your house, rubble, your wife pancaked, your crops shaken, not stirred. And what explanation do you have? Oh, a snake bigger than anything you could ever imagine. Cool. Good. Glad to know that there's something just slithering around beneath us and could surface at any moment. Definitely not living the rest of my peasant life in crippling fear.
In at number 5, the Wendigo. Also known as the Windigo or Witico, the Wendigo originates from Native American legend and is said to be a demonic half-beast as told by the Algonquin peoples along the Atlantic coast of the USA and Canada. The legend itself lends its name to the disputed modern medical term Wendigo psychosis, which is supposed to be a culture-bound disorder. To quote Basil Johnston, a teacher and scholar, the Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tauntly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash grey of death. Its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, the Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from separation of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odour of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. The most common interpretation of the Wendigo is that it's a spirit that possesses a person after they resort to cannibalism, whether that be under dire circumstances or not, and turns them into a Wendigo. They are also said to have an endless craving for human flesh and are sometimes said to grow in proportion to the meals that they eat, so that they never get full. Wendigos are known to have superior speed and stealth, the ability to mimic human voices, near-perfect hunting skills, and in some cases the ability to control the weather. They are also known to bring darkness before dusk. In at number 4 we have Dover Demon. Originating in Dover, Massachusetts, the Dover Demon is a small humanoid that was subject of an intensive scare during the 1970s. When multiple witnesses came forward reporting sightings across the area. This monster is described as looking like a grey alien, except that it has skin of a rosy orange coloration. It has a large head on a small body and oftentimes travels on all fours. Its eyes are said to glow, sometimes orange, sometimes green. The first sighting begins at 10:32 p.m. on April 12th, when Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazoka, and Andy Brody were driving north on Farm Street. Bartlett, who was driving, spotted something creepy along the side of the road. Think it was a dog or a cat, he thought nothing of it. That was until his headlights illuminated the creature. The creature turned its head and looked at the group, his large head on his stick-thin body, and his eyes glowing an orange colour. Now skeptics claim that the Dover Demon is simply a lost baby moose, which has been glimpsed under unusual conditions, making it appear humanoid. However, people don't believe this explanation and point out that all sightings happen during the wrong time of year for a moose that small to exist. In at number 3 we have Baba Yaga. Hailing from Slavic folklore, the Baba Yaga is a supernatural being or witch that takes on the form of an old hideous woman. In some stories she is said to fly around in a mortar, wielding a pestle and dwelling deep in the forest inside a hut that is said to stand on chicken legs. Baba Yaga has become one of the most memorable and distinctive figures in European folklore. In certain stories it is said that Baba Yaga may help or hinder those who encounter her or seek her out. In others she is known to kidnap children, threatening to eat them. In fact, many tales of witches living in houses made of candy or cake were named Baba Yaga. In some stories, heroes would venture into the wilderness to seek out help of Baba Yaga, asking for her advice or assistance in completing a quest. Sometimes she played the role of an antagonist, while other times she was a source of guidance. No matter the story, she always drives a hard bargain and will set out her conditions in terms of the agreement. All of her verbal contracts allow her the right to eat anyone who was later unable or unwilling to fulfill their end of the deal. Coming in at number 2, Dullahan. The Dullahan, also known as the Headless Horseman, is a type of fae originating from Irish folklore. It is said that this sinister being appears as either a man or a woman riding atop a black horse, but the rider has no head upon their shoulders. Instead, it is carried under their arm. It is also said that the head appears dead and rotten, with a demonic grin spread across its face from ear to ear. The Dullahan is also known to carry a whip made from a human spine, and sometimes pulls a wagon which is adorned with funeral objects. According to legend, around midnight on certain Irish festivals or feast days, the Dullahan Dullahan may be observed riding a dark and snorting steed across the countryside. Storyteller from the Mourne Mountains once recounted his experience with the monster, stating, "I seen the Dullahan myself stepping on the brow of the hill between the Bryansford and Moneyscalp late one evening, just as the sun was setting. It was completely headless, but it held up its own head in its hand, and I heard it call out a name. I put my hands across my ears in case the name was my own, so I couldn't hear what it said. When I looked again, it was gone, but shortly afterwards there was a bad car accident on that very hill, and a young man was killed. It had been his name that the Dullahan was calling." Now it is said when the Dullahan stops riding, that is where a person is due to die, and when a Dullahan calls out the person's name, the person immediately perishes. There is no way to block the road against a Dullahan. All locks and gates are open to them when they approach. They are however frightened of gold, and even a single gold pin can drive a Dullahan away. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Teki Teki. Hailing from Japan, Teki Teki is a malevolent ghost/demon similar to that of the infamous Kuchisaka Onna, or the slit-mouthed woman. Teki Teki was originally a human who was bullied and in some stories assaulted, resulting in her jumping off a train platform onto the tracks and getting cut in half by the oncoming train. It is said that she barely survived due to the cold weather, with her crawling to a person for help. But instead of aiding her, they left her to die. Now Teki Teki's vengeful spirit stalks the streets of Japan. She often lurks in urban areas and around train stations at night. Since she no longer has a lower half, she travels on either her hands or elbows, dragging her upper torso and making a scratching Teki Teki-like sound. According to legend, if she encounters an individual, she will chase them and slice them in half, killing them in such a way that mimics her own disfigurement. One particular legend goes as follows. As a young schoolboy was walking home at night, he spotted a beautiful young girl standing by a windowsill resting on her elbows. They smiled at each other for a moment. The boy wondered what a girl was doing in an all-boys school, but before he could wonder more about the girl, she jumped out the window and revealed her lower half was missing. Frightened, he stood on the sidewalk, but before he could run, she caught up to his location quickly and cut the boy in half. Sucks to be him.
Swooping in at number 5, we've got the Kamaitachi. You like your limbs, right? You'd rather they didn't fly off in the blink of an eye? Well, then you'd be best to avoid these wind weasels as best you can. Also known as the sickle weasel, the Kamaitachi usually roams around on whirlwinds in groups of 3. Sometimes they're brothers, sometimes even triplets, but the trio aspect is pretty much immovable. These little fuzzy flayers like to run around and cut people's legs off. At the ankles or calves is the usual choice, but you never know. Their method of slicing and dicing is pretty ubiquitous. The first weasel will knock the victim down, the second will come through with a sickle and slice the leg off, then the third and final fellow will run through, sew up the wounds, and put some numbing medicine on the newly stumpified leg. This all happens so fast most folks don't even notice their legs are gone until they're staring up at the clouds. Blink and you'll miss it. At first the numbing agent makes it so there's no pain, but that will wear off eventually, and then you'll get to deal with the pain of having your legs hacked off and sewn up by a tiny mammal. Coming in at number 4, we've got Hyosube. Okay, are you ready for my quick description of this? You sure? Alright, this is an eggplant stealing filth goblin. Doesn't that sound just wonderful? These short, hairy, dirty, humanoid things run around like they own the place and kill a whole bunch of folks as a result. If you see one, you die. And they don't do a very good job of staying out of sight. Hide and seek, this is not. They wander about just waiting for an unfortunate soul to behold them. As they live out their terrible little lives, they also eat all of the eggplants in your garden. Oh, you were gonna make some baba ganoush. Well, too bad. Hyosube say, "F your dip-based meals and f you too." All of the aubergines get consumed and they trample the fields for good measure. The jerks. The only way to avoid accidentally seeing one is to leave out some prime eggplants for them, and even this is hit and miss. For some reason, eating your crops and ruining your fields isn't enough, and Hyosube also like to use your bathtub. And like I mentioned earlier, they're very dirty little creatures. They're known for leaving behind ridiculous amounts of filth, like hair, dirt, and scum. To me, finding somebody else's filth in my bathroom is about an 8 out of 10 on the heebie-jeebies scale. So this is absolutely life-altering information. And by the way, you can't throw out the bathwater or it'll just kill you anyway. Honestly, I think I'd rather die than having to live with a tub full of goblin stink for the rest of my tenure. Coming in at number 3, we've got Tsuchigumo. Monsters have been mashed for as long as we can remember, and it's not always a graveyard smash, mind you. Sometimes it's the combination of many real, living creatures to make something extra nightmarish. Manticores, chimeras, ligers. Maybe that last one is real, but I bounce between Napoleon Dynamite and Joe Exotic for opinions on the mystical status of a But I bounce between Napoleon Dynamite and Joe Exotic for opinions on the mystical status of a lion-tiger crossbreed. Back to the Tsuchigumo though. This is a beast with the body of a tiger, the limbs of a spider, and the face of a demon. Part real mammal, part real, albeit much smaller arachnid, part mythical monster. Hell yeah, I want to fight this in a video game. But if I'm not behind an LCD screen with a super powerful video game avatar, I don't think I'd ever want to cross one of these. Apparently Tsuchigumo were known for eating travelers as they made their way across the countryside. In the remote fields, no one can hear you scream. 1 or 2 traveling morsels wasn't enough either. In one tale, a powerful warrior took one down and sliced it open. You know, to loot the body. We're back in the video game world, of course. And inside, there were 1,990 skulls. 10 shy of 2,000. That's a prolific people eater. Coming in at number 2, we've got Jorogumo. If you've ever seen the Spookies, you'll know that the best monster in the ridiculous mishmash is a spider woman. Now, the monster who drains the puppeteer dry and the Jorogumo aren't identical, but they do share the 2 major components of spider women. The spider part and the woman part. Deep analysis, I know. But getting trapped in a sticky web and having all your fluids drained, not fun. In fact, it sounds like a terrible time. For some. I feel like maybe some people might enjoy it. This is why arachnid gals are the worst. The Jorogumo is an ancient creature with depictions dating all the way back to the Edo period in Japan. Its upper half is that of a beautiful woman, while the lower half is hairy spider legs. We've all been there, right? It will lure men to a shack in the middle of nowhere, snare their prey in a web, and then eat them alive. Apparently, when a spider hits year 400, it gains magical transformative powers. I don't know what kinds of spiders usually live that long, but who am I to judge a creature with that much longevity? I probably won't make it till 50. In addition to some Jorogumo using their feminine charm to trap men, there are also versions that will manipulate good folks before devouring them. These spider women will show up with what seems to be a baby, begging for help. Soft-hearted people spring at the opportunity to help this poor mother and end up being torn apart by thousands of freshly hatched spider babies. You ever seen a spider nest ready to burst? Oh no, 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 no. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Tek Tek, a more modern piece of Japanese folklore, but with enough scare factor and staying power to top today's list. This is the tale of a girl who fell on the train tracks and was cut in half by a passing train. Somehow she was left alive and continued to survive even when her torso was completely separated from her legs. The upper half of this poor gal stalks the night, attacking commuters and dooming them to the same fate. Sometimes she'll cut the train goers in half herself, using a sickle of some sorts. Other times she'll just force them onto the tracks so they can experience a train running them over too. One might wonder where the name Tek Tek comes from, and like a lot of Japanese folklore, it originates from onomatopoeia. See, this half-person's exposed spine scratches against the pavement and makes a very distinctive sound. And in Japan, that sound is characterized as Tek Tek. Yes, she's named after bones being dragged across concrete. That's hardcore. More than probably any of the other entries on this list, Tek Tek makes regular appearances in horror movies, manga, and anime. And it really feels like a modern tale too, much more gruesome and human. Plus, the member of disfigurement is based entirely in modern technology. As much fun as it would be to visit Japan, I'm also sort of worried that I would get chopped in half or tricked into being food for some god-awful beast. Although I suppose that's true for visiting anywhere that has some sort of folklore. Maybe I'll just stay in the basement forever.
Coming in at 5, Garuda. Garuda is a legendary bird or bird-like creature in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain mythology. He is variously the vehicle mount of the Hindu god Vishnu, a Dharma protector and Astasena in Buddhism, and the yaksha of the Jain Tirthankara Shantinatha. It is described as a kind of bird and a kite-like figure. He is shown either in zoomorphic form or in anthropomorphic form. Garuda is generally a protector with power to swiftly go anywhere, ever watchful, and an enemy of the serpent. In Hinduism, Garuda is a divine eagle-like sunbird and the kind of birds. He is said to be a powerful creature in the epics whose wing flapping can stop the spinning of heaven, earth, and hell. He is also described to be the vehicle mount of the Hindu god Vishnu, as I previously mentioned, and typically they are shown together. Garuda's links to Vishnu, the Hindu god who fights injustice and destroys evil in his various avatars to preserve Dharma, had made him an iconic symbol of king's duty and power, an insignia of royalty or Dharma. His eagle-like form is shown either alone or with Vishnu, signifying divine approval of the power of the state. He is found on the faces of many early Hindu kingdom coins, with this symbolism either as a single-headed bird or a three-headed bird that watches all sides. Throughout the Mahabharata, Garuda is invoked as a symbol of impetuous violent force or speed and of martial prowess. Coming in at 4, Makara. Makara is a legendary sea creature in Hindu mythology. In Hindu astrology, Makara is equivalent to the zodiac sign Capricorn, which is my sign. Makara appears as the Vahana of the river goddess Ganga, Narmada, and of the sea god Varuna. Makara are considered guardians of gateways and thresholds, protecting throne rooms as well as entryways to temples. It is the most commonly recurring creature in Hindu and Buddhist temple iconography, and also frequently appears as a gargoyle or as a spout attached to a natural spring. It is generally depicted as half terrestrial animal in the frontal part and half aquatic animal in the hind part. Though Makara may take many different forms throughout Hindu culture, in the modern world its form is always related to the marsh crocodile or water monitor. Makara has been depicted typically as half mammal and half fish. In many temples the depiction is in the form of the half fish or seal with head of an elephant. It is also shown in an anthropomorphic with head and jaws of a crocodile, an elephant trunk with scales of fish, and a peacock tail. Lakshmi sitting on a lotus is also a depiction in which she pulls the tongue of the elephant-shaped Makara is meant to project Lakshmi's image as the goddess of prosperity, wealth, and well-being. It represents a necessary state of chaos before the emergence of a new state of order. Coming in at 3, Gandabaranda. The Gandabaranda or Baranda is a two-headed bird in Hindu mythology, believed to possess immense magical strength. It was the emblem of the erstwhile kingdom of Mysore under the Wadiyah kings, and after India attained independence, it was retained the Mysore state as its emblem. The bird is generally depicted as clutching elephants in its talons and beaks, demonstrating its immense strength. In the Chenakashova temple of Balor, Karnataka, Gandabaranda, the two-faced bird, is carved as a scene of chain of destruction in which a deer becomes prey to a big python, which in turn is lifted by an elephant. A lion attacks the elephant and the lion itself is devoured by Gandabaranda. The Gandabaranda was later identified as a physical form displayed by Narasimha, man-lion incarnation of Lord Vishnu. After Lord Narasimha had slain the demon Hiranyakashipu, he clung on to his dreadful form. The Devas were even more afraid of Lord Vishnu than they were of the demon. In order to protect the entire creation, Lord Shiva incarnated as Sharaba, a part lion and part bird beast. This further angered Lord Narasimha, who took the form of Lord Gandabaranda, who fought Sharaba for 18 days and held him between his two beaks and ripped him apart, thus killing him. Coming in at number 2, Ahai of Vritra. Vritra is a Vedic serpent or dragon in Hinduism, the personification of drought and adversary of Indra. Also identified as Asura, Vritra was also known in the Vedas as Ahai. He appears as a dragon blocking the course of the rivers and is heroically slain by Indra. According to the Rig Veda, Vritra kept the waters of the world captive until he was killed by Indra, who destroyed all the 99 fortresses of Vritra before liberating the imprisoned rivers. The combat began soon after Indra was born, and he had drunk a large volume of soma at Vashtri's house to empower him before facing Vritra. Vashtis fashioned the thunderbolts for Indra and Vishnu when asked to do so by Indra, made space for the battle by taking the 3 great strides for which Vishnu became famous. Vritra broke Indra's 2 jaws during the battle, but was then thrown by Indra, and in falling crushed fortresses that had already been shattered. Indra became known as Vatranan, meaning slayer of Vritra. However, the story changes in Puranic and later versions. As told in the narration given to King Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata, Vritra was a demon created by artisan god Vashta to avenge the killing of his son by Indra. Vritra won the battle and swallowed Indra, but the other gods forced him to vomit Indra out. The battle continued and Indra was eventually forced to flee. Vishnu and the sages then brokered a truce, with Indra swearing that he would not attack Vritra with anything made of metal, wood or stone, nor anything that was dry or wet, or during the day or the night. Indra instead used the foam from the waves of the ocean to kill him at twilight. Sneaky sneaky. And finally coming in at number 1, Sharaba. Sharaba or Saraba is a part lion and part bird beast in Hindu mythology who, according to Sanskrit literature, is 8-legged and more powerful than a lion or an elephant, possessing the ability to clear a valley in just one jump. In Sanskrit literature, Sharaba is initially described as an animal that roared and scared other animals in the hills and forest areas. In the great epic Mahabharata, this form of Sharaba was defined as a lion-slaying monster with 8 legs, eyes on the top, living in the forest, and which ate raw flesh. It is also mentioned as residing on Mount Kuruncha, but not as a monster, but as an ordinary beast along with lions and tigers. Sharaba appears primarily as the incarnation of Lord Shiva, as a name of a monkey king in the epic Ramayana, also as a proper name of heroes and serpent Najas, and one of the names of god Vishnu as well as Buddha. In Puranic literature, Sharaba is associated with the god Shiva, who incarnates to subdue fierce manifestations of Vishnu. The man-lion form of Vishnu brings about the rivalry between the devotees of Vishnu and those of Shiva. Sharaba is portrayed with 2 heads, 2 wings, 8 legs of a lion with sharp claws and a long tail. Sharaba is also described as black in color with 4 feet downward and 4 feet uplifted, with with an enormous body. It also had a long face and nose, nails, 8 legs, 8 tusks, a cluster of mane, and a long tail. It jumped high repeatedly, making a loud cry.